Welcome back to the Time for Heroes podcast. This week's guest is NME journalist Anthony Thornton. Anthony worked with NME, initially NME.com. Anthony's followed the Libertines the majority of their career, and between him and Roger Sargent they wrote a book called Bound Together, the definitive story of the Libertines. We talked about that. We talked about his early life growing up, how he got into journalism, and we spoke about what came after the Libertines. Also at the end, Anthony picked his 4 heroes to come for a dinner party. Hope you all enjoy the podcast. I'll be back again soon with another one. Thanks. Thanks very much, Anthony Thornton, for coming on the podcast. If people aren't aware of you, you're probably most famous for writing the Libertines book, Bound Together. You're also a journalist that's worked for the NME, as well as lots of other different publications, which we'll touch on during the interview. But I always like to kind of start off at the beginning, where you grew up, what life was like, school life, stuff like that. So if you just want to start off with that, let us know what life is like then.
Yeah, well, I had one of those, I don't know, weird kind of lives where I was born in Cardiff in Wales. My mum and dad are both Welsh, but we moved around loads as I was growing up. So I lived in Bristol, Peterborough, Grimsby, and just outside Crawley.
Whereabouts is that?
Whereabouts is that? Pure Hawley.
Right.
And so it was weird growing up because I didn't put down any roots in a way, but a lot of people I know did. Mm-hmm. But I think that probably gave me a little bit of independence and a kind of, I mean, I think it probably could have gone 2 ways. I could have either been, very, very demure and let life wash over me. But in actual fact, it did the opposite. It kind of gave me a bit of confidence, and it meant that I kind of felt that I could do things just because I had this experience. But then the other thing was at school, I was kind of one of those people who I absolutely loved writing stories. That's probably where everything starts. I love writing stories. And I remember writing stories for when I was like 5 or 6, which were like 10 pages long, and teacher telling me to stop writing now because that's long enough and things like that. So I kind of knew I wanted to write, but then I was also good at sciencey stuff and maths and things like that, which was so it was kind of split for me. I kind of like both, and then as I was growing up, I kind of hit that point where it's probably relatively late. I think I was probably about 12, 13, where I just started discovering music and like falling head over heels with it. Like I'd never loved anything before. I really, really went nuts for the Beatles. I went nuts for the Stones, and basically anything between like kind of 1966, 1970, I just went absolutely mad for.
Would that be due to your parents? Is that the sort of stuff they'd be listening
to? No. I mean, no. Hopefully my parents won't be listening to it, but they listened to some pretty terrible records. I mean, they had Reader's Digest box sets of like 12 records, which you can't get anymore, but they are like really, really bad. It's terrible music on. I went back and had a look when I was at university at these records, and there was literally nothing on there that I liked at all, apart from Pictures of Matchstick Men by Status Quo, which is just bloody excellent. And the best of Simon & Garfunkel. That was 2 things I kind of took from my parents. And I think that's probably why it was a bit later, because I think it was, because obviously we didn't have the internet, but it was also, radio was radio. I didn't, it was background music, but then I started to get into it, and then just met a group of like-minded people, who also kind of started obsessing over the 60s, and so by the time I was 17, we were going to record fairs and going to buy records, and with the NME, which obviously was the thing that told us what to listen to, and arguably how to think as well, because it wasn't just music; it was also what books you should read. Hunter S. Thompson, all came through the NME. And William Burroughs and all of that. So there was a big education there. And what's great when you're 16, 17, 18 is like you will try and read anything. And if anybody says this is okay, you'll go and dive in. And that's kind of what happened. So it was, it was, all the cliches. It was the Beatles, Stones, the Velvet Underground, Bowie, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Plus, Godard in film, and there's lots of great indie film made in the 80s, which was when I hit 17, and it was just a brilliant time for me. People, friends of mine, my friend Dominic, my friend Rick, Kerry. We all kind of were just feeding into this, and then also going on at the same time was a big comics boom as well. So that was kind of Alan Moore with things like Swamp Thing was really big, and that was really driving us. And we'd all read 2000 AD since the late 70s. I read 2000 AD since I was 6. And so I was kind of like fertile ground, I was really into finding out about things. And so it became, from the age of about 5 or 6, I wanted to write. I knew I wanted to write. Well, up to the age of 5, I wanted to be a fighter pilot, but that kind of fell by the wayside. And after that, it was very much wanting to be a writer. And then when I discovered music, and when I discovered the NME, the NME was this great thing where it kind of made no sense. Like you picked it up and it made absolutely no sense. There's a load of people who knew a load of stuff, and it kind of sounded interesting. It was kind of a bit of a club, and then probably after buying about 3 or 4 issues, it started to make sense.
Yeah,
and then at the point it started to make sense, it started to sound like the greatest thing you could possibly do.
Definitely. I lived my life with NME when I was growing up. And just like you say, like everything that did influence me, the way I dressed, the music I listened to, the books, all that, I so totally understand where you're coming from there.
And it was, it was the alternative education. We had we had BBC 1, 2, ITV, Channel 4, and we have a library, but the library is only good if you've got people telling you what books to take out of the library. And once you've exhausted everything you've heard about, the NME basically took you on this ride to new places and new ideas. It was astonishing. It really was. And I almost think that it's kind of position in culture is almost underestimated, not just because of not just around music, but also around everything else. And I think I know the late 80s, for a lot of people it had already gone past its golden age. There was already the Face and Smash Hits, which were kind of these 2 great pillars also talking about music. But for me, it kind of opened lots and lots of doors. And then I was living in Hawley, which is just near Gatwick Airport and near Crawley, and it was kind of it's because it was so close to Gatwick Airport, I think the idea was it almost felt like at school that you were going to go and work at the airport, and if you're going to go and work at the airport, it was kind of like,
my wife's from Crawley, and the majority of her family worked at Gatwick Airport.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's almost a kind of sense of it. You're going to go and work at Gatwick, probably. So we probably don't need to try too hard. I don't think education was on full throttle at that point. So I wanted to escape. I really wanted to get out of there, and reading was it, music was it, and university was it. And so I got to university, which is brilliant. And then I had this kind of extremely romantic idea about university. I thought it was going to be like everything I read about university in the 60s. It would be like-minded people, and I would be able to, find out about music and philosophy and, literature, and talk to lots of people, and try lots of things and do lots of things. And what actually happened was I got there, and it seemed to be a load of people just wanted to have jobs, which is a bit of a disappointment. I was expecting to, talk about launching magazines and things like that. But I went to Warwick University, and it was great. And I did get to try lots of things. I got to play in bands, which is brilliant, and I got to write. I got to hone my skills as a music journalist at the paper there. I got to write comedy, and I worked on a comedy radio show with a group of people, which was loads of fun and extremely stressful because we wrote half an hour of comedy every week. And they all went on to do really well. So people like Ben Ward, who now works with Matt Groening from Simpsons fame,
right?
And Dave Lamb, who is the voice of Come Dine With Me.
That's right, yeah.
Dave Lamb had announced my death on radio, which is brilliant, and I wish I had it on tape somewhere because it's very, very, very funny. So that was great, doing that. And then after university, I'd kind of always wanted to work for NME, always kind of had this dream, but I'd always go, weirdly, while being on the outside very confident and very very much knowing my own thoughts, I was also terrified, and I also never ever would actually send anything to the NME. And so and what was alarming for me was that there was a guy who was a year above me at university, a guy called Johnny Cigarettes, who actually did go and write for the NME. And not only did he go write for NME, he was a brilliant, brilliant writer. And he, for me, he was kind of a great, great writer of the NME during Britpop. I mean, just an astonishingly brilliant writer. And that actually made it worse because he was so brilliant. I kind of thought, I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do this. And so after university, I went to Birmingham. And I played in a band, which was a great experience, and we were good, and we got very, very close to being signed. We had advances from Mother Records, and lots and lots of people came to see us. Unfortunately, our lead guitarist, who's something of a genius guitarist, he had tinnitus. And so we were going to play a showcase, and he pulled out like 2 days before the actual showcase,
right?
Which is just tragic. I mean, Doran is just a brilliant guitarist, and not only a brilliant guitarist, he introduced me to Brian Eno, which I was clearly quite late on and should have been on a lot sooner. But yeah, just great. And
what
then
was the name of the band?
We were called Aphasia. We were called Aphasia.
Aphasia. And what sort of music we're talking about?
So we had three guitarists up front, and we were very much post kind of My Bloody Valentine. You know, we were making a hell of a racket live, and then we recorded demos which were kind of quite Britpoppy in actual fact, and less of that kind of live sound. So I've got tapes of it, and it's kind of the live stuff is very much in your face, and then the demos a bit not quite so abrasive.
Right. And what were you doing in the band with?
I was playing guitar and writing songs, and just thoroughly enjoying myself and playing. We're playing gigs probably every week, right. And it was a great time to play gigs because it was kind of 93, 94, and it felt like really exciting. And also I launched an arts magazine in Birmingham as well, which covered all the arts, and I was also writing for the Birmingham Post as well. And so I was learning my trade, and so at the same time as playing in a band, I was also seeing Oasis were playing to 100, 150 people, and this was my life. So it was kind of like seeing bands 3 nights a week, writing reviews for the Birmingham Post, and playing in a band, and dreaming of being a music journalist. I mean, it was a pretty great time. Yeah, it was a pretty great time.
Sounds amazing.
It was, we kind of saw, people like Oasis come through, and we saw, Elastica and Pulp and, Radiohead. And I mean, I remember seeing Radiohead, and they were touring the My Iron Lung EP, mm-hmm. and it was still all about Creep, and they played Creep like 3 songs in, and then everybody went to the bar after Creep, and it was just like, I've never seen anything like it. And then obviously they've become a band they are today, and I imagine there's very few people at a gig who will say, oh yeah, I saw Creep, and then I went to the bar because there was nothing interesting after that. But it was a great time for music. It was a great time for live music. And I remember seeing, for example, the Manic Street Preachers, and seeing them touring the Holy Bible, which was just an astonishing gig at Wolverhampton Civic. Mm-hmm. And, writing the review of it. And then seeing them again when they were touring Everything Must Go. And obviously it'd been a completely different thing, but, feeling it was just as important. Mm-hmm. But still, I was writing about it for the Birmingham Post, but I still wasn't writing about it for the NME, and that was kind of a big problem. It was tearing me up, mine. It really was.
Right. So, how did NME come about? Did you eventually pluck up the courage to get in touch?
Well, what happened with the NME was I saw this job advertised in '96, which was for editor of NME.com, mm-hmm. And it was a job that I suddenly knew had never existed before, but I suddenly knew I wanted it, and I knew it was my job. But I was writing for the Birmingham Post. I was signing on, and I knew that I didn't have a chance to do it. I'd never ever do it, and so it was tantalising, but it was so out of reach. I would never do it, and so my band imploded. So I decided it was time to get out of Birmingham, and it was time to go to London and do the Dick Whittington thing and make my fortune. And so and obviously the smart thing would have been to write something for NME and send it to them. That's the smart thing to do, and also the cheap thing to do. But actually the easy thing to do was to apply for a journalism course, and that's what I did. Apply for a journalism course and got on it. And and fortunately it was the journalism course. It's the one at City University, which is supposed to be the best one. And so I arrived there, and it was brilliant. And there was loads of talented people, and those people who were already making their way in the world. And I did something about, you had to get work experience. And so I got a work experience at because I didn't put very much effort into it. I got work experience at a place called Leisure Week, which is the in-house magazine for the leisure industry. That's for leisure centres across the UK. And I went and we did a week there, and it was the most nightmarish week of my life. It was so boring.
What would you be writing about in that?
I mean, it was literally things like a new leisure centre opens in Basingstoke. It would be that kind of thing. Taking a press release and renosing it. It was just terrible. And at that point, I was kind of 2 days into it. I went, right, I've now got to do something and stop, just thinking that it's going to come to me. And so I applied to the Independent, the Broadsheet Independent, to do work experience, and landed it on the travel desk. And in complete 180 of what I was normally like, I just went in and just went, I've got 1 week. If I blow this, then this is it. If I mess this up, I am basically going to, be writing for the in-house publication for Concrete or something like that. It's not going to happen.
I didn't think there was anything worse than Leisure Week, but you just topped it there.
Well, you'll be surprised. But I thought I did well landing Leisure Week in terms of an example of what I didn't want to do. Yeah. And so I went to the Independent and was working for Simon Calder, who's a brilliant journalist who's still around now.
He's for Crawley as well, is he not?
I think he might be, actually.
The guy that's on the BBC now, this is the travel in there. Yeah.
That's right. So, we Crawley people get everywhere, And then basically, the great thing was the travel desk was next to the arts desk. And so it was just like, I'm going to open your post, Simon, and then I'm going to go speak to the arts editor of the Independent. And literally within 2 days, I'd landed getting a commission. I'd been commissioned to write a live review. I just grabbed it with both hands, and then with it, so within kind of 3 or 4 weeks, I was writing live reviews, I was doing interviews, and really flying by the seat of my pants, but really kind of this is it, I've done it. But then there's a old Spitting Image joke about Orson Welles, and I'm not comparing myself to Orson Welles, but this joke is that Orson Welles lived his life in reverse, starting with, he basically ended up with whiskey ads and then worked his way back to Citizen Kane. And I basically went from nothing to working on a broadsheet magazine, broadsheet newspaper. And then my next thing was I landed at Q. I managed to get work at Q magazine. Right, which was brilliant. And I'd walked into Q in kind of 97, 98, and I was the indie boy. So I was doing all the indie stuff as all the big stuff was going off. So I was doing things like Placebo and Graham Coxon's solo album and all that stuff, and it was kind of picking around, and I loved it, absolutely loved it. And then the job came up for NME.com, and I applied for it, and I was interviewed by Steve Sutherland, who's the editor of NME, and he had a fearsome reputation. And when I walked into his office, he was terrifying. He was absolutely petrifying. I mean, I could not, this is like a combination of meeting your hero and the end of level boss on a computer game. This is it. This is it. And somehow I managed to get to that first interview by pointing out some of the shortcomings of NME that week. And then I had a second interview where I was interviewed by 10 people. And I thought what had happened was they were really, really strict on interviewing, and they really wanted to find the right person for NME.com. But what I discovered later was Steve had gone back and said, there's this guy who knows about the internet, you've got to see it. It's like mental. And it was like, so essentially I was like the exhibit. I was like at the zoo, and there was all these people going, I can't believe this guy. Who is this guy? And that, and I landed it. I landed it. I could not believe it. I'd done a year as editor of a website called Dot Music, and here I was at the NME in November '98. It was unbelievable. And they gave me all carte blanche to do whatever I wanted to do, because there were no rules, and that was the terrifying and brilliant thing about it. There was absolutely no rules.
So, see how you said that the advert had come up in '96? Would 96 be when NME.com started?
That's right. Yeah. So the first editor of NME.com was a guy called Brendan Fitzgerald, who was the chief sub, and a brilliant chief sub. And he landed for a job of editor of NME.com. In fairness, being a very good sub, but not necessarily knowing about the internet. And so he went off to work on something called Music 365 with Danny Kelly. Right. And so the job came up, and interestingly, actually, the job of editor of Music 365 came up at the same time as NME.com, which I also interviewed for. And I was offered the NME job before Music 365, and so I took the NME job. But Music 365 had kept me waiting for 4 weeks, and so I might have gone to Music 365 if it'd been a bit quicker. So. Who knows? Things could have been different for me.
Yeah,
definitely.
So what's the difference between writing for NME.com as opposed to writing for the magazine?
Great. I mean, for me, I think. I mean, I'd loved NME, but I knew when I went to NME.com, it needed to be quick, it needed to be fast, it needed to be about news, it needed to be talking about what had happened the day before, or in the last hour. What it couldn't be is 2,000 words written over the course of a week and then published in the magazine. And so that kind of speed was what it was all about. And so I really put a lot of time into making sure news was important. And then as technology came on board, it became about music, and it became about video. And so I was really very pleased to do the UK's first webcast, which was Suede live in Japan in '99. And we put posters up around London about the fact we were going to put this thing, even though it was most people still had dial-up, and we were lucky to be able to see it over a 1-inch screen. We were very much of the opinion that we should do it, and so that was really successful. And then we started doing more and more live webcasts. And then we were doing interviews from Glastonbury and Reading, and this was way before the BBC had, did big internet coverage. And so we were leading the way, and it was, it was true that our music news was also leading the way. We were really on it. So when Radiohead came back with the first stuff from Kid A, I was there the night they played that new material, and I was reviewing it and putting stuff up as they played. So they played a gig which took like 2 hours, and I put up 3 reports in those 2 hours, and that was amazing, and response to that was fantastic. This was 2000 now, and so there was no Twitter, no Facebook, or anything like that. We were just updating news stories.
Yeah, so essentially as well, then stuff like that would then appear in the magazine. Like maybe the following week, so you were kind of breaking the news and kind of bridging the gap from one week to the next.
That's right. And look, I mean, I have to say we're really lucky because the publisher, a guy called Robert Tame, had this philosophy, and I remember him taking me to one side and said, look, you've got to do this. You've got to put this stuff up because it's better. Because obviously there's loads of people snapping at our heels. There's loads of internet publications like Music 365 which are ready to take over. And Robert said, I'd much rather commit suicide than have somebody kill us. I mean, I don't know how much of a philosophy that is, but I mean, I understand what he's saying. He'd rather the enemy digitally was really important rather than somebody else becoming that thing. And so I had that carte blanche to do that. And also it meant that the paper became richer, I think, because we had that combination of something that was going to happen online, which would carry you through to the next week's issue.
Mm. So, I mean, I did like NME.com, but I was always I liked the physical copy of the magazine, partly because I collected them. I had bundles of them all in my room. So, as well as NME.com, you would have been writing stuff for the magazine as well, would you?
Well, that's right. So that's very much when I got in. I mean, it was unfortunate because it was 98, so it was a kind of tail end of Britpop and everything was feeling a bit slow and tired. And I think it was, no disrespect, but Travis were the biggest thing happening over here, and new metal was the biggest thing happening in the world. So that was a bit depressing to arrive at Enemy at the point, and you go, come on, let's do this, and you get there, and it's like everybody's going, it's rubbish, it's all rubbish. So I got there and got the opportunity to write about things, and then having edited enemy.com for a few years, the .com bubble burst, and so we'd grown quite big, and then it was very much put on hold. And I was basically said, somebody said to me, you can either carry on with fewer staff, or you can become the reviews editor of NME. Mm-hmm. And I dreamt of being the reviews editor of NME. I loved enemy.com, but being the reviews editor was an itch I really had, and so I got a chance to do that, and so I took it up, and the timing was just unbelievable because it was just the Strokes had just happened. The Strokes had just played those gigs, in Camden in front of like 150 people, and then a couple of days later at London Astoria for the NME shows, and so there's something in the air, and the timing could not have been better. And so now I was running the reviews desk and just looking at this whole new load of bands who were coming in, from people like the Yeah, and then not long after White Stripes and the Strokes, and then pretty soon us Brits got our shit together. Yeah, and we had people like the Libertines coming in, and I saw the Libertines. So they played an NME show, and I saw them in Camden at the Barfly. And I just thought they were just for great. Just like I hadn't seen a band. I'd seen a ton of bands. I'd seen so many bands you could not believe. And then I saw this band, the Libertines, and they were so brilliant. And so I did something which on paper is mental. I basically took the next day off because they were playing in Bristol, and I drove to Bristol to see the Libertines again, even though I was working for the NME. And anybody with any brain would have said, just go and ask the editor to go and see them again. But no, I took the day off, and I went and saw them at the Louisiana in Bristol.
And what was your thinking behind that? Was that just kind of to see if it was if it'd been a one-off, or if it was a real thing?
That's a good question. I mean, I think it was much more was much more visceral than that. It was basically I'd seen this band and I had to see them again.
Yeah.
And the easiest thing to do was just to say, I'm taking a day off, I'm going to go and see him. And yeah, as you can imagine, when the following day I was driving to Bristol, I'm just thinking, what if they're no good? What if I was like a one-off? What if they're kind of okay? You know, well, you know, I mean, at least I get a day off, I suppose. And so I went to Louisiana with my girlfriend, and we had a nice meal beforehand. There you go. That was it. We went to Bristol. We had a nice meal. So if they were terrible, at least we had a nice meal.
Yeah.
And they were better. And it was mad. They were better. They did this thing where basically this whole, but the stage was in front of us, and suddenly this whole noise went up behind us, and it was the band. It was Pete, Carl, John, and Gary, and they were dancing through the crowd to get to the stage, and the crowd parted to let them through, and they got on and they just kicked it off, and it was just immense and amazing. And I was thinking, this how could this be better than the night before? It was better than the night before, and they were just brilliant. They were just brilliant. I completely lost it. I completely fell in love with them, and I knew they were great, and I knew that that trip to Bristol definitely been worth it.
So at this point, was no one else at NME aware of them? Yeah,
so it was James Oldham, who was aware of them. James Oldham, who was deputy editor at that time and very much been around the Strokes, knew about them. But it was still coming through, and it was kind of like, yeah, no, they're interesting, but we'll see. And the interest, I mean, just to step back, I think there's a really interesting thing about NME, which I guess isn't obvious, which is that a lot of people think that the NME have this kind of, you know, we draw up the bands we like, and this is what we say, and it's kind of all closed, and you know, we've decided. In actual fact, what the NME is a seething bed of people rowing about music constantly and just fighting to get your band to the top and get them on the cover or get them a feature because you know they're brilliant and everybody else is a bloody idiot. And so you know, they were one of those bands I knew they were brilliant. I just knew they were brilliant. And there was plenty of people who didn't. I you know, it went on for, you know, not only months but years afterwards, and people just going, I don't get it. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
But you know, for me that was fine because it was patently obvious that they were great. And not only were they great, but everybody who experienced them became converts. It was almost like a cult. It was just like, yeah,
I've got them tattooed to my arm.
Well, exactly. How many people have band tattooed on their arm? You just knew they were so extraordinary. And look, I mean, I'd grown up, and my kind of Bible was John Savage's English Dreaming, which is obviously about the Sex Pistols, and also about the culture around the Sex Pistols and what a difference they'd made. And you know, bear in mind, at this point, I'm probably about 30, so I'm a bit long in the tooth for an NME journalist, and so I kind of knew that I'd missed it all. And then this band came on, and they are, but you know, they're not the Pistols, but culturally they represent something as significant as the Pistols.
Yeah.
And everybody got swept up in their wake who experienced them. I mean, and that's key, because it's very easy to sit in an office and go, well, you know, I'm not liking it as much as Fisher Spooner, who I do like, by the way, but you know, that's another story for another day.
But I mean, what the Libertines did was they were like the spearhead for a movement. Lots of bands came for them, for the Paddingtons, the others, bands like that. So there was tons and tons of stuff underneath. So do you think at that point, like you were saying, you were 30, you were long in the tooth, and then the Libertines come along, do you think that the Libertines would be the band that kind of define your journalistic career?
Yes, absolutely. I kind of knew this was it. I knew that they were really special, because of our Louisiana trip. But the thing that really cemented it was they started putting on guerrilla gigs and advertising them on the internet. And they basically played the show at their flat, which they called the Albion Rooms. And they advertised it. And you can imagine, for me, right, I'd done NME.com and I loved NME.com and I loved the internet. And there's this great band. And they're not only a very great band, they're putting stuff on the internet where you can go and see them. And it's just like, Christ, I couldn't invent this band. They're too perfect. They're too good. Mm-hmm. They're brilliant, and they're putting shows on the internet. And I went and saw this show, and it was photographs of it. You can see there's probably like 20, 25 of us in there, me looking very young. But they were just brilliant. And the police came to break it up. And when they heard there was police at the door, they started playing Guns of Brixton by The Clash. And when the police kicking your door, how are you going to come? It was just amazing. And then I got a cab with Roger Sargent, who was taking pics that night, into Camden, because we were going to go and see somebody else. I don't know who it was. I can't recall. But I just remember him and I just bonding and just going, I don't think we know how good this band are. We think they're good, but we really don't realize how good they are. And it was just like, we were just like comrades in arms. We had a common cause. We knew that they were great, but we kind of, in that cab ride, we realized that not only were they great, but they were better than we could possibly imagine.
Yeah, which I think that's exactly what all the fan base were like as well. And you do get defensive about them because, I mean, as it got further on, the media were, like the mainstream media were terrible the way they treated them. But
the mainstream and lots of music media. Lots of music media kind of wrote them off and didn't get it. And that was one of the things that really annoyed me. Was there was this idea that all great music had already happened, and if you weren't around in the 60s or 70s or the 80s, then you basically missed it. It was tough luck. You didn't see you've not seen great music. And that's a terrible and patronizing attitude. Not least of which because a lot of people didn't even get off their asses to go and see them. They were playing gigs every night. It wasn't hard to go and see them.
Yeah, and to go and see them and realise the connection that they had with their fans should have been enough to to prick MD's kind of imagination of what they were going to go into achieve.
Yeah. It was like nothing I'd ever seen. It was literally like nothing I'd seen. But absolute devotion of people to the Libertines. It was unparalleled. And, to the degree, look, I'd kind of, because I loved them, become the person right about Libertines for the NME. And I was treated with suspicion because I was part of the problem in inverted commas. But it's just like, no, I love this band. Mm-hmm. Absolutely adore this band. But, it did get mad later on. Ending up in the tabloids and everything, and trying to keep a kind of perspective was difficult. But also, very much having to make a decision about what was most important. But for me, it was always the fans first, the fans, and then the enemy second. and then the band third. And I think I always had to keep that, make sure that everything I was writing about and saying was through that filter. And I think it was the right thing to do. I mean, the good thing was I was a music fan, so it was relatively easy for me to go fans first.
Yeah. So at what point then, obviously you say you shared a taxi with Roger Sargent. At what point did you think we're going to write a book?
That's a little bit of a leap. It was a bit later. I mean, Roger was like the man. He'd been there. I mean, I think it's important to note that most bands by this time weren't. It wasn't like the 70s. It wasn't like photographers and journalists got to hang out with bands generally. It was kind of like you're in for half an hour interview and then you're out. Mm. But for me and for Roger, we were there and we were watching it unfold because we chose to. And Roger took all the great pictures, all of them.
Yeah.
And I was there, as they were, playing guerrilla gigs or breaking apart or, Pete going to prison. And so, I was there for all of it. And not because I'd sat down and gone, I want to write the book, but because it felt important.
Yeah.
It felt important that we were there rather than it coming second or third hand. And then after kind of like 12, 18 months of it, Roger said to me, look, you have written about them, you know them, you've been there, and I've taken all the photographs. We should do it. We should do this book. We should do something about them. We should make sure it's preserved because other people will write things which are just not true. They will write the kind of grimy, awful story instead of a story which is the real one, which is about four people who came together to try and make this great kind of music and make this great scene. And he's right. He was completely right. And so I kind of started pulling it together and writing a brief, which I sent off to an agent, and they liked it. They thought it was good and exciting, and then it then went out for bidding. Went out to a number of publishers, and in the end, two publishers got into a bidding war over it, which was just kind of weird and strange. And then it became the fact that it became obvious that for one of the people bidding got it much more and understood what we were trying to achieve. And what we were trying to achieve was a definitive kind of artifact, something which was the full story, but also the full imagery.
Yeah.
Because we had offers where it was kind of like, write the book and we'll put kind of 16 pictures in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, no, but it has to be the whole thing together. It has to be the words and the pictures. It has to be, Roger's amazing imagery, and it has to be their amazing story together in one book and put together in a way where they complement each other. And so we signed that deal because they got it, and they put an amazing designer on it as well, and it was kind of like, fuck, we've got to actually do this.
It does look amazing. Like I got it out the day just to have a look at it again to remind myself. And just like it's a different size for any book. It's kind of bigger, but no too big. And the design, it's brilliant. And the pictures on each page and stuff like that. Everything about it's amazing. It's probably one of the best books I've ever owned. And I don't say that lightly.
That means a lot. That really does mean a lot. Thank you.
I mean, there is a lot of, as you said, there is other people writing about them, and I have read a few other books. I've read Pete's mum's book, obviously. I've read the Pete Welsh one.
Which is very good, by the way.
Yeah, that's a good one. But you could tell at the time, if you went into like kind of no so much Waterstones, but see like the cheaper bookstores, and there was tons of Pete Doherty books, and you're like this is Pete's biography, and you could tell just by the front cover that it was going to be shit.
Yeah.
But
there's a really. I remember when myself, Roger, and our designer met, and it was one of the weirdest things. It was in a pub called the Alma in Stoke Newington in North London, and we were all really nervous. And I was really worried that this designer was going to come and do all the hoary old punk cliches and want to do, ripped up kind of newspaper text and stuff like that. And within 10 minutes, we basically had this conversation where he was really worried that this photographer and this writer guy were going to want to do this kind of punk, all these punk cliches in design. It was just like, no, we're completely agreed. We want to make it look great. We want to make it look as good as possible. And it was a huge sigh of relief. And then we got around drinks in, which is great.
Obviously, so you had this relationship with Roger Sargent, and what sort of relationship did you have with the band? Obviously,
really close. As I said, I've been there most of the times that something had happened, whether it was, guerrilla gigs or, the last gig that Pete played before he went off into rehab in Asia. And I interviewed them both several times, and we had a kind of trust, I think. I think they kind of knew I wasn't gonna sell them down the river. But then they also knew that I would also print the truth. I was kind of like I said before, going back to, it was all about fans and making sure fans knew what was actually going on. So I became quite close to Pete and Carl in particular, and Gary, and John to a lesser degree. John's very much his own person. He is quiet, yeah. And I think that the other thing is that with particularly with Pete, was that I think Pete had become used to kind of interviews who'd done their research on Wikipedia and being able to kind of handle them, whereas I kind of knew the story and would be able to challenge him a bit more. And I think he liked that, actually, being able to actually crossing swords with somebody who actually knew and had been there. And I think when we came around to do the book, I was very fortunate in the sense that it was not an official book and would never be an official book, but everybody was happy to be interviewed.
Right.
And so I had the best of both worlds, which was basically, none of my copy was approved by the band. I just wrote it. But also I could interview everybody as well.
Right, because that was going to be kind of leading into that as to what their opinions were when you're writing the book. So they were perfectly happy for this to go ahead.
Yeah. Look, and I think there's probably bits in there which people won't like. Pete, Carl, John, Gary won't be 100% behind, but I knew I was going to write it, and I knew it better than anybody else, so it was fine.
So, Pete, because I've had Mark Beaumont on, and I've had another couple of people that I've kind of had dealings with Pete, and I think the kind of general consensus is that it can be hard to nail him down in an interview, and kind of. So, would you say he was better behaved for yourself, or worse?
I think generally better behaved. I think generally, not on his best behaviour, because that would be obscene, but generally better behaved. I mean, look, I remember a lovely occasion when I was interviewing at the back of Rhythm Factory. Right, it was, I think, and I may be conflating stuff, but let me go with it. I think I'd spent the day with them. They were recording the second album. I'd gone into the studio at 10 a.m. I'd gone into the studio at 10 a.m. and walking in, and guy from Rough Trade, James Endicott, who's a brilliant guy, had introduced me to Mick Jones from The Clash, which is just like mental, but you go with it. And then they were recording tracks from the second album, and then later on they went on stage and did Another Girl, Another Planet with what's your fella from The Only Ones, for some reason.
Peter Perrett.
Thank you, Peter Perrett, because Peter Perrett was there, which is another story I need to tell you another time. But Peter Perrett was there, and it was just a glorious day. From 10 a.m. till 2 a.m. was just like every rock writer's dream, as you can imagine. You're in the studio, they're recording an album, it sounds great. Everybody thinks they're going to implode, but the album sounds great, or bits of it I'm hearing anyway. And then afterwards, I'm trying to interview him, and it's just too loud in the back room of Rhythm Factory. And so Pete says, look, I tell you, it's too loud. Let's just go out, and then you can interview me. And he and I left the Rhythm Factory, and he got on a bike with a guitar, and he's playing. He's riding no-handed and playing a guitar and singing songs, and it's just like, Christ, this is like, it's 2005 Ford, and and obviously video phones haven't been invented, so I missed this whole thing. Everybody should see this. It was like one of the great moments. It was brilliant, and so he indulged me, and so we did the interview, and we did it away from the Rhythm Factory, and it was good. It was a good interview, but I mean that's a moment where I really wish I'd had an iPhone, but unfortunately I didn't get one for another 7 or 8 years.
Obviously, there have been so many big moments within the Libertines' career that you've had the pleasure of being around at the time, like obviously Pete getting out of prison, stuff like the recording of the second album, things like that. So what would stand out as like the biggest moment for you? Would it be that Pete getting out of prison? That was a brilliant kind of reunion story.
It was that, yeah. I mean that's the one. I mean it's so. I mean, to try and be dispassionate and stand outside of it, nobody could have invented that. I mean, it's too perfect. I mean, Pete robbed Carl. Pete robbed Carl's flat and goes to prison for it. And, it's kind of all over. The band's all over. It's finished. I mean, it's obviously finished. And then the guy called Dean, who must have been like 19 at the time.
Is that Dean Fragile?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. He's communicating with Pete, and he lives in Chatham, and he basically says, can I put on a Freedom gig? And Pete says yes. Like, he's 19. Do you know, to go back to what I was saying before, when I was 19, I was terrified of writing and sending something to the enemy. Dean Fragile is setting up gigs with Pete Doherty, and he sets up this gig, and it's in Cham, and everyone's there. They're all there, and I'm there interviewing Pete, and I'm there interviewing Pete and Carl, and it's just like, have you got any plans for tonight? And it's kind of like, well, you have to look, you have to see what happens. And they play. All four of them are back on stage. They play together. Everything is put to one side. All the issues. It's the end of a film, mine. It's kind of like, this is how it all ends, and then the titles go up as they're reunited playing this unbelievable gig.
Was this because I listened to a podcast last week. I don't know if you've heard it, Boys in the Band podcast, and they have they have people for bands on every week, kind of these Cooper Temple Claws and blah blah blah. So it was the guy for Black Wire,
right?
And I'm pretty sure he was talking. I'm pretty sure it was his gig, and then the Libertines obviously peaked it out, and they weren't meant to play the gig, and then they appeared, and Blackwire had to go in first. Is this right?
It's not Black. I'm trying to remember. Sorry, this is a terrible thing to say. It's not Blackwire. Right. It's another band whose equipment they borrowed, if memory serves.
Right.
But yeah, you are right. It wasn't. It was they basically steamrolled somebody else's gig.
Yeah, it was meant to be. It was going to be Pete, and then it was going to be Pete and Carol, and then all of a sudden the full band was there. So I mean, stuff like that. That's like legendary.
It's an unbelievable night. It's absolutely incredible, and just and to go back to something I was saying about the Enemy earlier, is what you would imagine is the whole of the Enemy office would have been there, but there was like three of us, and it's just like. Yeah. You know, this is not only is this the great band reforming, this is also a great band who are doing something extraordinary and one-off and once in a lifetime. You would have imagined everybody would have been there. So that was really peculiar. But I mean, just an unbelievable night. I did the interview, which is also terrifying because I thought I wasn't going to get the interview. But I got it. Roger got the photo, which went on the cover, and then another photo, which became the cover of the second Libertines album, and also the cover of the book Bound Together. I was stood next to Roger as that photo was being taken, which is amazing because the photo is like it's kind of weird. Pete and Carl look like they're in a bubble. It's kind of like. Weird kind of thing where they're on their own. I mean, it looks like two people who are completely in their own world and can take on the rest of the world. And it's something almost weirdly quiet about that, even though you've got Carl looking very defensive and Pete showing a tattoo and it's a brilliant photo, and as I say, it's kind of moment captures like real tranquility. But what was actually happening was Roger was taking that photo, and Roger was shouting at them both, and Roger was telling them they needed to move. I mean, telling them to show the arm, and so you've got this weird. For me, I've got this weird dichotomy where I know that Roger was working his arse off to get those pictures and get those pictures brilliantly, but the pictures came out just looked like this incredible serene moment in time. It was extraordinary. I'm very lucky to have been there. I'm very, very lucky. And then I then got a cab back that night to write the story, to write the cover interview for the Enemy. And Enemy stumped up to pay for a cab, which was like 80 quid, which was unheard of. They would actually pay 80 quid. And so I got back to the Enemy office at 4 a.m, and I filed my copy, I think, at about 8 o'clock. And it was a great experience. I mean, obviously it's stressful, but it was a really good experience filing that, and just knowing that I'd captured what I thought was a moment in music history.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's defining for myself and many others. Obviously, the next album's come out, and then you've kind of had to watch the band kind of fall apart. Obviously, being so close, I mean, I know how I felt, and I'm just kind of a fan, kind of 400 miles away from all this, but you're kind of right there in the epicenter. So how kind of upsetting was that? And obviously, you still need to kind of keep your journalist head on as well. So,
well, it was. I mean, that kind of period where they got back together, which is amazing, and then they played a whole load of gigs. We played like gigs in Hyde Park, where we played on the island, which unfortunately I didn't go to, but and played in Kebab House, and they played lots of shows at the Rhythm Factory. And they played an amazing show at Duke of Clarence where the original Libertines with Mr. Razcox on drums played, and then Baby Shambles, and then the Libertines played. I mean, just unbelievable shows, and it all felt really good. And then, as I mentioned, I've been into recording, and that had felt good. And then just cracks began to show, and it was just kind of, it really was depressing. I kind of, for everybody involved, you know, for the band, definitely, for me, and, you know, people like, you know, everyone at Rough Trade. I mean, to be fair, Rough Trade, and I think Mick Jones, in fairness, kept it together, you know, quite, and got it done. No, when everybody thought it wasn't going to get done, and it did get done. And you know, they played the brilliant show for Jonathan Ross, which is a great. It's got one of the great gestures when they played "Can't Stand Me Now," and they banged their guitars together in this cross, and it just looked so cool, and it felt like they were unstoppable. That was a great show. That and Amy Winehouse was on that show as well. And so it just felt they had so much momentum, but it felt like it couldn't be stopped. And then, but it just began to fall apart. And, you know, we end up with they played a show in Club Infinity, where Carl had his a club, and they played 7 songs, and they ended with Good Old Days, which is just like, you know, come on, guys, it's just like, you know, if you're going to do the one that really breaks every heart, you know which one you're going to do, and they do it, and that's it. And then Pete flies off, and then that's it. You know, it just falls apart. It was so sad. It was just, and like, I kind of, at that point, I knew that my time at Enemy was coming to an end, because there was never going to be a band like Libertines for me in the Enemy. You know, I couldn't sit there and go, you know, whatever band coming in this week is, and get excited about them. I'd invested so much emotionally into them that I just knew it was time to start looking elsewhere. And I think it was, you know, it was just such a shame, because I kind of thought their third album, you know, if they'd carried on, would have been, you know, the London Calling of that generation. It would have been big everywhere in the whole world. Yeah. So it was just terrifically sad.
The thing is with that as well, kind of, I know what I'm like as a music fan, and see if the band you love gets too big that everybody likes them, you end up hating them. So, I mean, that's one of the good things about the Libertines, is that they got to a level, obviously, for the fans. I mean, for their career, they should have went higher, but for us as fans, no everybody likes them, so that's a good thing in my book.
I think that's really interesting, because they you know, speaking dispassionately, speaking as a journalist, speaking as somebody who writes stories, they're perfect in that sense, because they split up after 2 albums, and they're 2 great albums, and they did a load of shows, and, you know, everybody saw them in that kind of brief period, knew how amazing they were, and talk about it now. So yeah, I mean, you know, from a kind of history point of view, you know, it was perfect.
Yeah, I mean, because I spent, like, after that, Pete was in the tabloids constantly, and I must have spent a good couple of years just arguing with people at work, and because everybody had an opinion about Pete Doherty, every day, and it was always a bad opinion, and I just felt that I was just having to defend him all the time, and it gets tiresome doing that, doesn't it?
It does.
What is your relationship like now with the band? Do you have any contact with them now?
So I see Carl probably every kind of 3 or 4 months. But last time I saw Pete was at Carl's 40th birthday in Margate, which was a brilliant night, which is a really good night, and it was excellent because they both looked good and they were both great mates, and you could kind of tell that it was carrying on. And this is before the Margate Hotel was open. But yeah, it was a brilliant night, and Pete was on great form. I do love seeing Pete. I do love just chatting to him.
Yeah.
I do see Carl more often, as we said. I don't see John so much because he lives in Sweden.
Mm-hmm.
I do see Gary quite a lot because he lives on my road, which is quite mad. And I've lived in this house now for something like 9 years, and Gary moved onto my street about 5 years ago, and we had no idea it was going to happen. And then we end up being neighbours, which is a bit Stella Street, but quite nice.
I'm pretty sure something like that happened. A similar sort of story with the Holloways. I'm sure there was 2 of them kind of. That's how they met, because they were in the same street, something like that. Just one question that I kind of forgot to ask. I've always been fascinated with Pete and Carol's relationship, and I looked at my own relationship with my best pal, because we were both Libertines fans, and I always thought of myself as Pete and he was Carol, because he seemed to kind of, when we got into a nick, when we got drunk or whatever, he was the one that would look after me and shout at me and get me home and things like that. So I always kind of, I don't know if I romanticised that, but what did you think of that relationship? Because it's one of the most genuine relationships I've ever seen.
I think so. I mean, they kind of saw in each other stuff that they didn't have, and they kind of complemented each other and drove each other on, and continue to do so. But I think it was that combination. The weird thing about rock and roll, and I can't quite understand it, is that there's actually far fewer kind of duos in rock than you'd imagine there would be. There's kind of Pete and Carl, and then there's Strummer and Jones, which obviously, if anything, is probably for closest comparison. And then you've got Jagger and Richards, and you've got Lennon and McCartney. But the thing they all have in common is that they all brought something to a party which everyone didn't have, I think. And I think that's definitely true of Pete and Carl. And I think, look, I mean, rather like yourself, I have unbelievable mates. And I kind of always thought that together we could do stuff which on our own we couldn't.
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely the case with Pete and Carl. And weirdly, look, it's the same with me and Roger. It's just like I couldn't have, that book wouldn't have been a quarter of a book it is without Roger. And I'm sure when you speak to Roger, he will say that book wouldn't be nearly as good without Anthony. Maybe, I hope so, cross fingers.
The final kind of word on the book, obviously, Pete, what he said about you for the back cover.
Yes.
Anthony Thornton is better than Lester Bangs. So what sort of accolade is that? You happy with that?
Well, am I happy with it? Yes. There's not a music journalist in the world which wouldn't be happy with that. Yeah, I mean, look, that was just incredible. I mean, he said it. And we were talking about we did an amazing thing at NME where we did a split cover of Pete and Carl, and we did an interview with Pete and an interview with Carl, and it was as they were breaking up, and it was, for me, it's one of the high points of the NME.
Yeah.
Because it was, for music fans anyway, at that point, it was the most important thing in everyone's world, was to get Pete's view and to get Carl's view, and then to have a split cover, which it wasn't my idea. I have to, it really, really wasn't my idea. Yeah. But that was just brilliant, and it was when I was interviewing Pete for that cover that he said it, and It was just like, that's just probably the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. So I'll definitely take it. But Leicester Bangs is pretty special. Do you know what I mean? I think, in fairness, while I love Pete dearly, I'm not gonna put on my CV I'm a better writer than Leicester Bangs.
So, obviously, book's done, and you said NME was coming to an end. So, what have you been doing since then?
So for me, I mean, I was very, as I said, the writing was very much on the wall when Libertines came to an end. And I felt that with a book done, I'd done the kind of wanting to write something big and important about something which was culturally significant. And then I'd had a couple of offers since for writing books, but they didn't feel right because I wasn't there. So I was offered writing a Stone Roses book, which would have been great. Don't get me wrong, it would have been great, but I wasn't there in 88, 89, and so it didn't feel right. And so I had a choice to either look at going back into digital and internet, or to go the Mojo and Uncut route, which are both magazines I have an awful lot of respect for. But it just felt like digital was more exciting. And so ever since then, I've been looking at digital magazines, and I worked for the British Film Institute for 3 years, which is brilliant. The British Film Institute, who really just at the forefront of film, but really needed help digitally. I was really happy to be able to do that. And so since then, as I say, it's very much been about doing digital work. So currently, I work for global content director for a company doing concierge. So that's kind of lots of travel and things like that, which is great. It's not music. I'm very much of a view that music is a young man's game, a young person's game, to be correct. And I think I was very lucky to have been there at a really important time. I mean, I was lucky because I caught a little bit of the Arctic Monkeys. I was there when the Arctic Monkeys came through, and it was kind of a weird thing about Arctic Monkeys was everything that I said was going to happen kind of happened with the Arctic Monkeys, in the sense that bizarrely on the Libertines forums, everybody knew about the Arctic Monkeys before anybody in the outside world knew about them. So everybody knew the song because there's that amazing set of demos which got uploaded, and everybody knew them, everybody knew the lyrics. And so when they were kind of breaking it through, and I remember seeing them in the Islington Academy, and everybody knew it. And I think we'd written about them, the NME, but we hadn't, we hadn't done this thing where we went, "Hey world, there's this great new band you should hear about." It was kind of like, "Hey world, you probably download them already, but now we're going to talk about them."
Yeah, because I heard Conor McNicholas. I think he said the Arctic Monkeys were kind of like the death of NME, because the fans had heard them before the magazine were able to review them. When he went to review them, the fans were already singing the songs. Something along the lines. My friend, my Libertines friend, Pete and Carol, he came away with a statement. I think it's the most ridiculous statement ever at the time when Arctic Monkeys came out. He said he was batting the Cooks because the Cooks came out around about the same time, and he said it was going to be like the new Blur and Oasis, North and South. And I thought, you're talking absolute bollocks. So I just I liked Arctic Monkeys for then on, and he's still a Cooks fan, and that's how we don't get it as much now.
Well, that's a shame because he backed the wrong horse because they were clearly much better than Cooks from the outset.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, look, the singles are good, but for me, A Certain Romance on that first album is a record, is a song that basically says, this isn't just an okay band, this is a really great band.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like hammering that to people, saying, you've got to listen to this because this is like, that's Entertainment by The Jam, but modernized and just so on it. And it's such a great tune. It's such a great tune.
Well, that's just it hanging, and his lyrics kind of still stand up now, like 5 albums down the line. He's still kind of coming away with great lyrics.
They're incredible. I mean, I don't know if you remember this, but there was, The Guardian actually wrote a piece saying he couldn't have written those lyrics. Do you remember this? When they came out, they wrote a piece saying he's too young, he can't have written them, somebody else must have written them. I mean,
yeah, that's just like so cheeky, isn't it? It's no kind of.
It's really, really condescending, and also kind of like, unless you've been to, in inverted commas, unless you've been to, university in Oxford or Cambridge, how could you dare write lyrics as good as this? It's madness.
But the only reason you can write those lyrics is because you've seen those things happening, you've lived that life.
Definitely.
So, obviously, the podcast is called Time for Heroes, and I asked all my guests to pick 4 heroes to come for a dinner party. Gemma Clark, obviously, she was on the last one. She ended up picking about 15 different heroes. I couldn't shut her up. I say 4 heroes, but if you want to go over the threshold, that's fine, as long as you get a big enough table to sit them all in.
I'm quite happy to sit them in the garden if necessary. So, this is a hard one, and I've thought about it quite a lot. But I thought I really wanted to mix it up. So I think, first of all, I was thinking about Dorothy Parker, the great kind of New York wit and writer. She's just brilliant. And anybody who's ever written a word should look at Dorothy Parker. Just extraordinary talent. And also just somebody to keep everybody else in place, I think.
Right.
Which is really important, I think, for a good dinner party.
So what did Dorothy Parker do? I'm not aware of.
She was just a brilliant wit and writer in the 1920s. She had a round table of writers, but she was definitely the number one, and just a real inspiration. For anybody who's wanted a great turn of phrase, Dorothy Parker is the one.
Okay.
And then I think I am going to go over. I warn you, sorry in advance. Then, really, look, this is personal. I really would like Egon Schiele, the painter, to be there, because he's just an amazing painter and just such skill. And I really want to find out how he does it, because he has such economy. And I really. He paints a view of humankind which is simultaneously beautiful and ugly, right. Which is just great. And I just want to find out more what makes him tick, which actually brings me on to my next guest, which is Richie from Manic Street Preachers.
Oh,
just a brilliant mind. And just one of those people who, for me, like, I was born in Wales, but moved around. But Richie is kind of the person who, an autodidact. He made himself. He read himself into being, which is something just stands as just a complete inspiration for me. And also I just want to know what he's been doing and how he's thinking.
Yeah.
Then Nina Simone then is just brilliant songwriter, brilliant pianist. Should have been a concert pianist, should have been a classical concert pianist, but because of racism wasn't given the opportunity. But just fiercely brilliant, and just her own songbook is brilliant, but every time she takes on something else, she breathes new life into it. So I've been listening to her version of George Harrison's "Isn't It a Pity," which is just phenomenal.
Yeah, that is a brilliant song. I've got a Spotify playlist of just people covering the Beatles, and all kind of those ones they're the best.
Yeah, that's great. I really like Ray Charles doing Eleanor Rigby as well. It's just great. And then I really like Miles Davis to come in, just because he's amazing. This is going to be quite a contentious place, I think. And then James Baldwin, the writer, just because he's a brilliant intellect, great writer. Another Country is just one of my favourite books ever. I have two more, if you'll indulge me.
Yeah.
Arthur Lee of Love, who is the guy who made my favourite album ever. I absolutely Forever Changes is still 30 years on, my favourite ever record. I was very, very lucky to meet him once, and he was an absolute gentleman and brilliant person. And I was also lucky enough to, when I was at the NME, to recommend him for an award which we gave to him.
Right.
And that was a real dream to come true. He's like, that record's just extraordinary. Yeah. And what a life. I mean, what an unbelievable life. And then finally, because I think you should always have a bit of style, I think you should always have somebody who can bring something else to it. Jane Birkin, I think, would be good to have as well.
Right.
She made great records with Serge Gainsbourg, but I've seen her live. She's absolutely incredible. Just a great performer, and just so stylish. So that would be my dinner party.
That's class as well. I mean, not one of them's been picked by anyone else. That's like top dollar. So you've doubled the amount of people, I think, there that you were allowed, but I'll let you off with that. So make you cooking them.
I've got a big garden. It's all right.
Yeah.
What am I cooking? Good question. Yeah. So, look, I think the conversation is going to be flowing pretty well. So I think the important thing is to make sure I've got good wine around and anything else that people want on that front. And then I think in terms of cooking, look, I do a pretty good pizza. And by pretty good, what I mean is the last 10 years of my life, I've been obsessed with making the best pizza I possibly can. So I'd chance it, and I'd actually get my pizza oven out and make pizza for everyone. And it would be, I think it'd be okay. I think it'd be okay. But it's been 10 years in the making, so hopefully it'd be good enough to keep Nina Simone happy. Maybe not, but I promise. I hope so.
Sounds amazing. So that's us at the end. Thanks very much for coming on my podcast. You've been an absolute pleasure to interview.
That's been great. Thank you.
And we'll end it there. I hope you all enjoyed this episode of Time for Heroes podcast. If you would like to get in touch, the best way is on the Facebook page, Time for Heroes Podcast, or on Instagram at Time for Heroes Podcast, or Twitter at Time for Heroes P1,
or drop me an email at timeforheroespod@gmail.com. You'll find Time for Heroes on all podcast platforms, including Spotify, Apple, Google and Amazon. Please leave a review where you can, share with others, and more importantly, enjoy.